What if a desperate act of survival could lead to a love more profound than any grand design? Imagine a time when a woman's worth was measured not in gold, but in her capacity to endure, to hope, and to find an unexpected solace in the most unlikely of places. This is the untold story of Clara Jenkins, a woman on the run, cornered by circumstance, who made a choice so drastic it should have ended her. Instead, it became the very beginning of her true life. She wasn't seeking romance, not in the desolate vastness of the American West. Clara was simply seeking shelter, a roof over her head, a fleeting escape from the relentless pursuit of a past that threatened to swallow her whole. Every day was a battle, every night a silent prayer for deliverance from a fate far worse than loneliness. Adrift and utterly alone, Clara found herself trading her freedom for a chance at survival, offering herself as a bondswoman to a stranger she knew only by his fearsome reputation, a solitary Comanche man, hardened by the wilderness, known for his stoic silence and his impenetrable spirit. Everything you've been told about romance on the frontier is about to be challenged. This isn't a tale of dashing cowboys and damsels in distress. This is a raw, emotional journey into the heart of two souls from different worlds, forced together by desperation, yet bound by something far deeper than duty. When Clara stepped onto that remote Comanche homestead, she expected hardship, perhaps even despair. What she found instead was a quiet dignity, a surprising kindness, and a connection that defied every boundary of race and culture. She believed she was trading herself for a roof, for food, for a temporary reprieve. But what she received was a home, not just a structure, but a sanctuary for her wounded spirit. She found a heart, not just a beating organ, but a love that blossomed in the silence between them, understanding born from shared solitude. She discovered a future, not the bleak existence she had resigned herself to, but a horizon brimming with possibility, forged in the crucible of their unlikely bond. This is the story of how Clara Jenkins, through an act of desperate sacrifice, found not just survival, but an enduring love that changed everything she thought she knew about life, about home, and about the human heart. You won't believe the secret that kept them together. The dust, fine as powdered bone, swirled around Clara's worn boots as she trudged across the parched Texas plains. Each step was a testament to her desperation, a silent prayer whispered to the indifferent sky. Clara had known hardship her entire life, but nothing quite like this. Her last meager coins had vanished days ago, spent on a crust of stale bread and a sip of muddy water. Now, only the relentless sun and the vast emptiness of the land accompanied her. Her family, once a bustling unit of farmers, had been swallowed by the relentless westward expansion and a plague that left only Clara standing. She carried their memory like a heavy stone in her heart, a constant reminder of what she had lost. Clara clutched the tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, less for warmth and more for the illusion of protection it offered. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, a dull ache that had become a constant companion. She scanned the horizon, hoping for any sign of life, a wisp of smoke, a distant ranch, anything that promised respite. Days had blurred into a monotonous cycle of walking, hoping, and the crushing realization that she was utterly alone. Her once vibrant spirit, known for its resilience and quick wit, was now a flickering ember, threatening to extinguish with every passing hour. The harsh reality of her situation pressed down on her, a suffocating weight. She had heard whispers in the last town, a place called Redemption Creek, about a Comanche settlement further west. Tales of their fierce independence and their refusal to bend to the will of the white settlers were common. There were also hushed mentions of their generosity, their ancient customs of hospitality, especially to those in dire need. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but Clara had no other options. The thought of trading her labor, her very existence, for shelter and food was a bitter pill to swallow, yet survival demanded it. She had nothing left to offer but herself. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara spotted it, a faint column of smoke rising in the distance. Hope, fragile yet persistent, flickered within her. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the burning in her calves and the throbbing in her temples. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and something else, something wild and unfamiliar. She imagined the faces of the Comanche, stern and unyielding, and a tremor of fear ran through her. What if the rumors were false? What if they turned her away, or worse? Despite her trepidation, Clara pressed on, her resolve hardened by the sheer necessity of her plight. She was a stranger in a strange land, utterly vulnerable, yet driven by an instinct to survive that transcended fear. This was her last chance, her only hope of escaping the clutches of starvation and exposure. She didn't know what awaited her, what price she would have to pay, but she knew she couldn't turn back. The vast, unforgiving landscape had stripped her of everything but her will to live, and that, for now, was enough. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep violet. But for Clara, the beauty was lost to the gnawing fear in her gut. She pulled the tattered shawl even tighter, its meager warmth doing little to ward off the chill that had begun to creep in with the fading light. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into menacing shapes, and the howl of a distant coyote sent a shiver down her spine. The vastness of the plains, once a symbol of endless possibility, now felt like an endless trap. She had gambled everything on reaching this Comanche settlement, a desperate throw of the dice against the unforgiving wilderness. Days blurred into an agonizing crawl. Clara pushed on, her legs aching, her throat parched, her spirit wavering. The thought of her family, of their laughter and their struggles, became both a torment and a lifeline. She remembered her mother's gentle hands tending the garden, her father's booming laugh echoing across their small farm. These memories, once so comforting, now highlighted the stark reality of her isolation. Yet they also fueled a stubborn resolve. She would not surrender. She would not let their memory fade into the dust alongside her. Water became her obsession. Every dry creek bed, every patch of withered grass was scrutinized with desperate hope. She licked the dew from leaves in the early mornings, a meager offering from the indifferent land. Her lips cracked, her tongue felt like sandpaper, and the constant thirst was a relentless tormentor, a physical manifestation of her growing despair. The landscape itself seemed to conspire against her, an endless expanse of sun-baked earth and thorny scrub, offering no solace, no relief. Then, on the fourth day, a faint trail appeared. It was barely discernible, a subtle indentation in the hard earth, but to Clara it was a beacon. Hope, fragile yet persistent, flickered within her. This had to be it, the path to the Comanche settlement. Her pace quickened, a surge of adrenaline momentarily overriding her exhaustion. She imagined a place of shelter, of water, perhaps even of kindness. The whispers from Redemption Creek had painted a vague picture, but anything was better than the slow, agonizing end that awaited her on the open plains. As the trail grew more defined, leading her through a gentle rise and fall of hills, Clara's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. What awaited her at the end of this journey? Would they be welcoming, or would she be turned away, left to face the wilderness once more? The thought of being rejected, after all she had endured, was almost as terrifying as the journey itself. She knew she had little to offer, only her will to survive and a desperate plea for sanctuary. Her life, her very existence, now depended on the mercy of strangers. Every step brought her closer to an uncertain fate, a new chapter she had not chosen, but one she was now forced to embrace. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but Clara barely noticed the beauty. Her focus remained fixed on the distant outline of what she hoped was the Comanche settlement. Each labored step brought her closer, and with proximity came a new wave of apprehension. She had traded the gnawing certainty of starvation for the unsettling uncertainty of the unknown. Her mind replayed the whispers she had heard in Redemption Creek, tales of fierce warriors, and a life so different from her own. Could she truly offer anything of value to such a people? As darkness fully enveloped the plains, Clara sought refuge beneath a scraggly mesquite tree. The air grew colder, and the vast silence of the land pressed in on her, amplifying the thumping of her own heart. She pulled the tattered shawl tighter, a meager defense against the chill and the growing fear. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by images of her lost family and the daunting task ahead. She knew her life, her very existence, now depended on the mercy of strangers, a heavy realization that settled deep within her bones. The dawn brought no immediate comfort, only the stark reality of another day facing the unknown. By mid-morning, a faint wisp of smoke appeared on the horizon, followed by the sight of teepees rising like silent sentinels from the earth. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This was it. Her journey's end, or perhaps its true beginning. Her legs, weary from days of walking, found a renewed, if shaky, resolve. She pushed forward, each step a testament to her desperate plea for sanctuary. As she drew closer, the sounds of the camp reached her, the distant murmur of voices, the crackle of fires, the playful shouts of children. It was a symphony of life, so different from the desolate silence she had endured. A figure emerged from the settlement, a lone Comanche warrior on horseback. He was tall and imposing, his posture radiating a quiet strength. He rode slowly towards her, his gaze unwavering, assessing. Clara felt a tremor of fear, but she held her ground, refusing to avert her eyes. This was her last chance, her only hope. She had nothing to offer but her will to survive and a desperate plea for understanding. As he drew nearer, Clara could discern the intricate beadwork on his buckskin tunic, the feathers woven into his long, dark hair. He was unlike anyone she had ever encountered, an embodiment of the wild, untamed land. He reined in his horse a few yards from her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Clara's throat felt dry, her voice suddenly lost. She swallowed hard, searching for the words, any words to convey her plight. Her hands instinctively clutched the worn fabric of her shawl, a small comfort in the face of such overwhelming presence. She knew she had little to offer, only her will to survive and a desperate plea for sanctuary. Her life, her very existence, now depended on the mercy of strangers. Every step had brought her closer to this uncertain fate, a new chapter she had not chosen, but one she was now forced to embrace. The Comanche village, a cluster of hides and timber against the vast expanse, now loomed before Clara. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the plains. She had walked for what felt like an eternity, her body aching, her spirit frayed, yet a strange resolve had settled within her. This was it. This was the moment she had both dreaded and yearned for. The point of no return, her life, her very existence, now depended on the mercy of strangers, a truth she had whispered to herself countless times during the arduous journey. As she approached the outer perimeter, a figure emerged from one of the lodges, a tall, imposing man whose gaze seemed to pierce right through her. He was the one she had heard about, the leader, the lonely Comanche. His face, etched with lines that spoke of hardship and wisdom, held an unreadable expression. She braced herself, her mind racing through the few words of the Comanche language she had managed to glean from passing traders. Her tongue felt thick, her throat dry, but she knew she had to speak. With a deep breath that tasted of dust and desperation, Clara began, her voice a fragile thread against the immense silence. She explained her plight, the plague that had stolen her family, the relentless journey, her desperate need for shelter. Each word was a plea, a raw confession of her vulnerability. She offered what little she possessed her will to work, her knowledge of medicinal herbs learned from her grandmother, her unwavering determination to survive. Her gaze never faltered, meeting his directly, conveying a strength that belied her weary appearance. The Comanche leader listened, his eyes unblinking, his face a mask. Clara could not discern his thoughts, could not gauge whether her words resonated or simply vanished into the dry air. The tension was palpable, a heavy cloak settling around her shoulders. She had laid bare her soul, offered her very life in exchange for sanctuary. Now, all she could do was wait. The sun beat down, relentless, mirroring the intensity of the moment. Every fiber of her being screamed for a resolution, for an end to the agonizing uncertainty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice deep and resonant. His words were few, delivered with a quiet authority that left no room for question. Clara strained to understand, piecing together the unfamiliar sounds. He spoke of the harshness of their world, the constant struggle, the need for all to contribute. Then he gestured towards a small, unoccupied lodge at the edge of the camp. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of a monumental decision. It was not a warm embrace, not an offer of comfort, but it was an invitation. It was shelter. It was a chance. A wave of relief, so profound it threatened to buckle her knees, washed over Clara. She had done it. She had traded herself for shelter for a chance at life. As she looked at the lonely Comanche, a strange sense of unease mingled with her relief. His eyes, though unreadable, held a depth that hinted at untold stories, at a solitude that mirrored her own. She had found shelter, but what else had she walked into? What would this new chapter demand of her? The answer, she knew, lay within the quiet strength of the man who had just given her a home and perhaps, unknowingly, much more. The Comanche elder, a Wam, and whose eyes held the wisdom of generations, watched Clara as she moved through the camp. There was a quiet strength about Clara, a resilience born from enduring the harshness of the plains and the solitude of her journey. She learned their rhythms, the subtle language of the wind through the grasses, the meaning behind the calls of distant birds. Each day, Clara felt a new layer of the dust and despair that had coated her spirit begin to peel away, revealing the vibrant woman she once was, a woman who could laugh freely and find joy in the simplest things. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, the elder beckoned Clara to her side. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat, a comforting aroma that had replaced the gnawing emptiness Clara had once carried. The elder spoke of the land, of the ancestors, and of the delicate balance that sustained life. Clara listened, captivated, her heart open to the ancient wisdom. The elder then turned her gaze directly to Clara, her eyes piercing yet gentle. She spoke of the man who had given Clara shelter, the lonely Comanche whose quiet strength had been her anchor. She said he saw in Clara a reflection of the spirit he had lost, a kindred soul who understood the vastness of solitude. Clara's heart quickened. She had felt the unspoken connection, the silent understanding that passed between them. He had never pressed her for her story, never questioned her past, simply offered her a place, a safe harbor in a world that had offered her only hardship. His kindness had been a balm to her wounded spirit, his presence a quiet comfort. She realized then that the shelter he offered was not just from the elements, but from the crushing weight of her own loneliness. He had given her back a piece of herself she thought was forever lost. The elder smiled, a knowing warmth in her eyes. She spoke of a future, not of grand pronouncements, but of the gentle unfolding of two paths merging into one. She spoke of the courage it took to open one's heart again after loss, to trust in the quiet promise of a new dawn. Clara understood. Her journey had led her to this place, not just for survival, but for a destiny she never dared to dream of. The vast, empty plains that had once symbolized her despair now seemed to stretch out before her as a canvas of endless possibility. In the days that followed, Clara found herself drawn to him, not out of obligation, but out of a profound sense of belonging. Their conversations were often brief, punctuated by comfortable silences, but each word, each shared glance, wove a stronger thread between them. He showed her the ways of his people, the art of tracking, the stories etched into the stars. Clara, in turn, shared tales of her own past, not the sorrowful ones, but the memories of family and laughter, of the simple joys that had once filled her life. The world, which had once seemed so vast and indifferent, now felt intimate and full of promise. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that she had found not just a home, but a heart that mirrored her own, and a future she could finally embrace. The dust of her past was settling, revealing a clear path forward. The Comanche elder's eyes, deep pools of ancient wisdom, met Clara's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Clara felt a profound sense of belonging, a connection that transcended words. The ceremony, simple yet deeply meaningful, wove her into the fabric of this new life. She had arrived as a solitary wanderer, a shadow adrift on the vast plains, but now she stood embraced, not just by a man, but by an entire people. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long finally receded, replaced by a warmth that spread through her very being. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, each one deepening her understanding of this world and her place within it. Clara learned the rhythms of the land, the language of the wind through the tall grasses, the subtle shifts in the sky that foretold rain or sun. Her hands, once accustomed to the rough texture of farm tools, now deftly prepared hides, wove intricate baskets, and ground corn for daily meals. She found joy in the simple acts of creation, in contributing to the collective life of the camp. The skills she acquired were not just practical. They were pathways to a deeper connection with her surroundings, to a life lived in harmony with nature. The Comanche warrior, her protector and now her partner, taught her to ride with the wind, to track game silently through the brush, and to read the signs of the wild. He spoke little, but his presence was a constant comfort, his quiet strength a steady anchor in her new world. Clara saw in his eyes a reflection of her own journey, a shared understanding of solitude overcome and new beginnings forged. Their bond was not one of grand pronouncements, but of shared glances, unspoken promises, and the quiet comfort of presence. He had offered her shelter, but in doing so, he had given her so much more. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft violet, Clara sat by the fire, watching the stars emerge, one by one. The familiar ache of loss, once a gaping wound, had softened into a gentle remembrance. Her family's memory was no longer a heavy stone, but a guiding light, a reminder of the resilience that had brought her here. She had carried their spirit across the plains, and now, in this new home, she could finally honor it. Clara looked at the warrior beside her, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, a silent gesture of love and belonging. The vast, indifferent plains that had once stretched before her like an endless void, now felt intimate and full of promise. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that she had found not just a home, but a heart that read her own, and a future she could finally embrace. The dust of her past was settling, revealing a clear path forward, a path she would walk with strength, with love, and with the quiet certainty of belonging. The sun dipped below the distant mesas, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a familiar masterpiece Clara had come to cherish. Her fingers, once calloused from desperation, now traced the strong lines of his hand, a hand that had offered not just shelter, but a sanctuary for her very soul. The fear that had once been her constant companion, the gnawing uncertainty of tomorrow, had long since faded, replaced by a quiet, profound peace. She remembered the chill of that first night, the desperation that had driven her to a trade she never thought she'd make. Yet in that lonely Comanche's eyes, she had found not judgment, but a depth of understanding that transcended words. He had seen beyond her tattered clothes and weary spirit, recognizing a resilience she herself had forgotten. He had given her a home, yes, a sturdy dwelling against the harsh elements, but more importantly, he had given her a place within his world, a place where she belonged. Their days were filled with the rhythms of the land, the quiet companionship that deepened with each shared sunrise. Clara learned to read the signs of the seasons, to find comfort in the vast, open spaces, and to trust the man who walked beside her. He, in turn, had learned to open his heart to share the quiet wisdom of his people, and to find joy in the simple, everyday moments they built together. The initial bargain, born of necessity, had blossomed into something infinitely more precious, a bond forged in mutual respect and in unspoken affection. Her journey, which began with a desperate plea for survival, had culminated in a life she never dared to dream of. The woman who had offered herself for a roof over her head now stood tall, her spirit unbroken, her heart full. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a partner, a companion, a cherished part of a new family. The lonely Comanche, through his quiet strength and unwavering kindness, had not merely offered her shelter. He had given her a future, a true home, and a love that transcended the boundaries of two very different worlds. As the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, she leaned her head against his shoulder, knowing, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she was finally, truly home.